Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, the podcast for the leaders and entrepreneurs of today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, Charlie, finish on. Let's go.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 284 of the Today's Leader podcast. Now, once again, we have an amazing show just for you. Now, if you are listening for the first time or you've been listening for a long time, please take the time to review the podcast on whatever platform that you're listening to. Share it with your friends or anyone that you believe may benefit from it. We are here to provide valuable content to leaders at all stages of their leadership career, and your reviews help us get found by more leaders that need and will benefit from our content. So once again, we have an amazing show. Now, lawyers having career shifts is something that I would imagine happens fairly regularly, but career transitions are usually not as extreme as this one that we're going to feature today. Now, moving from the legal fraternity, our guest today has become a happiness coach. Now, Becky Morrison is a UC Berkeley certified executive coach with a passion for helping people live happy, priority-aligned lives. Now, after a successful career in financial services as a litigator and then in law firm administration, managing several hundred attorneys and staff at one of the country's premier litigation firms, she was looking for a new challenge and transitioned into a small investment firm where she was the chief operating officer. Now, this transition helped Becky recognize that indeed her true passion was people. So she started her own coaching practice. Now, she's a lifelong learner. She's still currently working towards her LLM in taxation from Georgetown Law School, and she currently lives in Virginia with a husband and 2 children. Now, the story that Becky provides is quite awesome. There's so many insights into this particular episode, too many to name. So when we return from our sponsors break, it's my pleasure to bring you Becky Morrison.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
It's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. I have Becky Morrison. How are you, Becky?
I'm good, Tony. Thanks.
Tell me the condensed version of Becky Morrison. What's the Becky Morrison story?
The very short Becky Morrison story. So, as you know, I'm a lawyer turned happiness coach. And so it's kind of a complicated story, but I'll try to make it short. And it goes something like this. I started out my life and career doing all the things I thought I should do. I got good grades, went to a good college, went to a good law school, got a good legal job, and then had a recognition that I was not actually enjoying it. And so spent the next half of my career really trying to navigate finding jobs and career options that were a better fit for who I am at my core. And ultimately landed here as a happiness coach, helping other people live happy, lead happy, and build happy businesses.
I think going from a lawyer to a happiness coach is probably the most contradictory that I've heard. So well done.
Yeah,
well done and congratulations for making
thanks. Yeah. I mean, I talk to people and I say I took a bunch of career left turns, and I had somebody ask me kind of recently, well, if you kept turning left, didn't you end up back where you started? And actually the way I think about it is I sort of took a spiral into the heart of who I am. I mean, that's really what happened. And so I did take some weird career shifts to get to this place, but each step I took, I think, gave me an opportunity to learn skills and then to sort of really refine what success means to me and how I want to show up and how I want to serve and help people.
Excellent. So what area do you specialize in as a happiness coach?
I mean, happiness. Is that an answer? But honestly, I'll tell you, I work with kind of three different categories of people. I work in the executive coaching space with leaders who are just entering a new level of leadership and want to do that in a way that is authentic and happy for them. In the entrepreneurial space, I work with other purpose-driven coaches primarily, but some other folks too, who are really looking to build a business that fits their definition of success and they're happy. And then more broadly, I when I talk about living happy, I kind of work with people generally to figure out how to bring more happy into their life right now.
You've got a formula for maximum happiness. Is that correct?
I do. So I have a book. The book is called The Happiness Recipe, and it's based on the following idea. It's based on the idea that the recipe for happiness is actually very simple. It's do more of what matters and let go of the rest. So simple doesn't mean easy. Simple doesn't mean easy to execute necessarily.
Yeah.
And so the book and my work really walks people through closing what I've identified are the three gaps that kind of get in the way of us executing on that formula.
Okay. I like the concept of simplicity, and it's something that I share with my leadership clients continually, that the more simple that we can make things, the easier it is for other people to align to it and to understand it. But with simplicity comes a level of advancement. So you need to be significantly advanced to embrace simplicity. Otherwise, complexity, bureaucracy takes its place. And that's what we tend to see in so many areas of our lives. Unfortunately, we're governed by bureaucracy, we're governed by red tape, because it's just easier to say these are the 20 steps that you must follow, instead of, potentially giving a broad-based vision and get there the best way you can, which is probably the most simple sort of a concept. So the formula. So what are the gaps that you speak to?
Well, there's three. And I've kind of made these up on my own, but I think they make sense. So the first I call the authenticity gap.
Yeah.
And that is actually where we don't know ourselves what it is that we need to be happy. We're not truly in touch with what we need, or we're not willing to outwardly claim those things. So an example from my own life would be sort of that moment in which I recognize that, hey, lawyering isn't really doing it for me, but here I am. I've invested all this time and energy in becoming an attorney. What do I do now?
Yeah.
That's about closing the authenticity gap. Now, because we're an action-driven society, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about what I think is the third gap, and that's the physical energy gap. So I said the formula is simple, right? Do more of what matters, less of the rest. But are we actually living that? Are we actually spending more of our time doing the things that matter most to us? And are we able to let go of the rest? Which brings us back to the middle gap, which I think often gets missed. And I call it the emotional energy gap, but it's really the mindset gap. Yeah. Do we have the mindset that will allow us to take what we know, who we are, and show up authentically and live it? Do we have the supportive beliefs and feelings and the tools in our toolbox to make that happen? So that's how I think about it.
So when you're talking about what matters most with people, do you find that when you first start working with them, they're really not sure what matters most?
I get one of two categories of people primarily. Occasionally I'll find a client who's already very in touch and has already really done a lot of work on that authenticity piece. But often people, when I ask them that question of what makes you happy, either say, I don't actually really know, or they start with a list of very high level things, many of which are societal shoulds, and some of which are just vague categories like vacation makes me happy. Well, yeah, I get that. It is happy making. But I'm not sure that aspiring, at least today, to be on vacation all the time is realistic. So when we talk about happiness and how to incorporate more of it into your life right now, that answer on its surface isn't going to be helpful. So we have to dig a little bit deeper.
I like that concept of society shoulds. That obligation that we all face, I guess, in relation to that. And I suppose with that, there's also that perception of wanting to say the right thing and be seen to be doing the right thing. And
absolutely,
it's really people are fascinating, and just as I'm probably fascinating to other people, and you're fascinating to other people. Often what we say is important is the direct opposite to what it is that we're doing. So in so many cases,
yes.
So, hey, tell me a little bit about. So I've seen some articles that you've written, and you've got some really good, clean content in relation to this. And there's two that I just want to dive in, if you allow me to. So,
Sure.
One is inviting the nervous system to be a partner in your process. Now, I've never heard it phrased like that before. So just help my listeners understand how that can happen, inviting the nervous system to be a partner in your process.
Well, so first, I need to say a couple things. One, I need to say I'm not a neuroscientist, right? So when I talk about the neurosystem, if there are folks out here listening who have a really deep scientific background, you're going to tell me I'm oversimplifying it. Yeah. And the answer is yes, I am. Because like you said earlier, right, we often take things and make them more complicated than they need to be. So here's what I think that people need to understand about their nervous system as it pertains to both happiness, change, and growth. It's this. Our nervous system at a very primitive level is designed to keep us safe, but it is not distinguishing between actual risk and perceived risk. It just knows that different is bad because it doesn't know how to keep us safe in different. It knows how to keep us safe in the same, right? So every time we confront a moment of growth, a moment of expansion, our nervous system stands up and waves a flag that says, danger, danger, don't go there, right? Now, then we can layer on top of it all the patterning that our nervous system learned over the years of our life about the times that we lost something, lost connection, lost having our needs met in some way. And we've got these rules almost written into our nervous system operating system that say, don't do that, not safe, right? So anger, if, for example, as a child, anger was bad, anger bad, don't blow up, not safe, don't express your anger. But this is an example of where simple isn't so great because it's these old patterns. We don't have like updates to our nervous system operating system over the course of our life like we do our cell phone. And so here we are sitting as adults operating on something that was about getting our needs met as someone much younger and much more dependent on other people. So that's my long, but also high-level nervous system description. Yeah. How do we get the nervous system to be a partner in our progress? There's a couple things. First, we work with our nervous system to start to understand its triggers. Let me explain. The pathways that go from your body to your brain far outnumber the pathways that go from brain to body. Why does this matter? It matters because it means that your body knows danger or senses danger before your brain does. So if we can get out of our heads and tuned back into our bodies, we can know when we're going to be in a triggered nervous system state. Why does that matter? When you're in a triggered nervous system state, your brain is not functioning at optimum capacity. So think about that in the workplace. If I can know that, for example, when I have to have a confrontational conversation, I have a little bit of a nervous system reaction to anger and it shows up in my stomach. When I get that gut feeling, I can know I have two choices. Take a minute, excuse myself, calm my nervous system down, or offer my nervous system acknowledgement and direction. So yes, nervous system, I get it. You're trying to keep me safe. And that was a rule that mattered in the past, but I'm an adult now. And in this situation, I'm in charge and I'm going to keep us safe. Thank you for raising the red flag. You can come along for the ride, but you are not going to drive. Yeah. And I know that sounds silly, but it's really important that we acknowledge these cues from our body. Otherwise, they just get louder, kind of like a toddler who hasn't been listened to.
Absolutely. And that's a fascinating way to describe that. I was visualizing that the whole step of the way, Becky. So I think that once again, there'll be listeners out there that are saying, oh, I'm starting to get that now. So sometimes when we paint that most of the time when we can paint a broad-based vision, people can visualize it and then start to understand themselves a little bit more. They don't need the complex theories or the academic papers to actually read and understand, because, fundamentally the only thing academic papers are good for are other academics. So there's not too many people that go to sleep every night after reading, a couple of pages of an academic paper. But it's about how we simplify that and put that into use. And I think that was fundamentally fantastic what you just did then. So I hope that was of great value to the listeners, because I think the next one will be too. I mean, the next topic that I just want you to touch on is, are you saying no enough? Now, this is a topic that I talk about with leaders in relation to things like time management and productivity. How do you use that particular scenario? Are you saying no enough?
So if you go back to my formula for maximum happiness, or my recipe for maximum happiness, there is a saying no inherent in that formula, right? It is do more of what matters and let go of the rest, which requires saying no. And I think one way that we bring complexity to our lives is when we are living a life that is already full and we don't have all that we want, we add more without subtracting anything.
Yeah.
So subtraction is hugely powerful and hugely important. But there's a reason that this falls into that third gap that I talked about. There's a lot of work that needs to be done before you can figure out what it is that you need to say no to, before you can figure out that you're really going to be comfortable dealing with the feelings that come along with saying no, or the triggered nervous system that comes along with saying no. And so I'm not sure that fully answers your question, but I like to think about saying no as one of the last things we do in this process. Because you need to be armed with a deep knowledge of what actually matters to you, what your current priorities are. And then getting to the point of saying no becomes much easier because you've got a decision framework. And so you're just applying that.
And for a lot of people that are out there, probably saying no comes more so from that direct emotional state. And they're saying no potentially to the wrong things. Whether it's an emotional outburst with a partner or a family member, and then all of a sudden you don't speak to them for 30 years, whereas that person is actually inherently important in that person's life. And so that investment in time in understanding what to say no to. I mean, Henry Cloud always talks about, in business, there are things that we need to be pruning, but we need to have a process to be able to prune those things. We just don't prune for the sake of pruning. We've got to understand what's dying and what's not going to get better, and they're the things that we start to look to prune. So I think when people can have some level of that investment in themselves to understand what isn't serving them, that can really start helping that say no process.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you make a good point, right? Because there can be a lot of emotion attached to saying yes or saying no. And so it's allowing your brain, your nervous system and your brain, the opportunity to work together to figure out, okay, and obviously this isn't, a deep process when you're deciding whether you want fries with your burger, right? But like when it comes to making a slightly larger decision, right?
Yeah.
Really slowing down enough to say, okay, so if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? What won't I be able to do? And how important are those things? And then also, what could I mean, it's sort of a similar question, but what could I gain by saying no to this?
Yeah.
What opportunities would show up? What space would be created in my life? And then really asking yourself too, how is fear playing into what you want to say here?
Yeah.
And let's get really clear. And when I work with my clients on it, let's name the fear, and then let's dig as far as we can to the root of the fear. Like oftentimes people will say, well, I'm afraid of saying no because this feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Well, I'm pretty sure there ain't no such thing, right? I mean, if it's really what's meant for you, if it's really on your priority list, it will come around in some version again. But then too, when people say that, you have to ask, that might be true. It might be a once in a lifetime thing, but is it something you even want in your lifetime?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do you actually want it? Or is it this like, I'll finally be able to have checked the box that I have a C at the beginning of my title, you know? And
Yeah.
maybe that matters to you and maybe it doesn't. Let's really take the time to think it through, to talk it through, to feel into it and figure out our answer.
Yeah, excellent. There's a couple of things I'm really liking with what you're talking through, Becky. First, and this is from a little while back, you talked about acknowledging those emotions and those feelings. And so many people look at this concept, say, of emotional intelligence and say, that means I've got to suppress it. And no, you don't. It's not about suppressing. Because when you suppress things, ultimately there's going to be an explosion. So it is about acknowledging and then working through the best methodology to make it work. So when you're working with, so I'll put you on the spot here. Which is your favorite customer to work with?
You mean out of the categories that I described?
Yeah, because you had 4 or 5 different.
I've got a wide range.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. My favorite customer to work with, I'm not going to really give you the answer that you're looking for, but my favorite customer to work with is the customer who is willing, 2 things, willing to go deep, right? And so really willing to sort of like go under the surface. I'm very practical and very tactical. But before we get to tactics and practical tools, we're going to figure out the right foundation. Like it's all about building that foundation. And so people who are willing to do the deep work before the action taking is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is people who are willing to, who really are willing to try things that might sound a little weird. I'll give you an example. And this goes back to that nervous system conversation we had. So I was working with a client who's an engineer. And this client is very data driven. And when we very first started working together in our first meeting, I assigned the following homework. I said, I want you for the next 2 weeks between our meetings, I want you to every day to track your physical cues that we just talked about in terms of your nervous system. Where are you feeling it? And what is that emotion? And my client looked at me like I was 10 kinds of crazy, right? Because that is not why they had signed up. They wanted to, supercharge their leadership skills and whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, just try it. And they did. And you know what happened? They came back the next session with a spreadsheet. Because remember, I said data driven, right? Yeah. And they were like, look at this. There's a pattern. When I feel this, this is the issue. When I feel this, this is the issue. When I feel this, this is the issue. And now I know how to address all of these different things. And I know that if I walk into a meeting where there's going to be conflict and I'm feeling sick to my stomach, like it's cool. It's just a nervous system thing. It's not actually a problem. And I know how to manage it. And like being willing to like try that stuff that's outside your comfort zone, that's where the real exciting growth happens. So that's not an answer to your question directly, but those two dimensions of person are my people.
And I guess fundamentally that I think I was sort of looking for that sort of a question answer anyway, I guess. So because, we all love those people that actually dive in and really start working within themselves based around what it is that we can help them, support them with on their journey. So, Becky, who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
I mean, there's a couple people. One jumps to mind as somebody who was really influential in bringing the humanity to leadership in my mind. And so I've worked in law firms for the better part of my career, and law firms in the US in the time that I worked in them are probably, this might be unfair, but 15 years behind corporate when it comes to what they're doing in terms of talent development and talent management. But I worked for a law firm, and there was a man, his name is Brendan Sullivan, who effectively ran the law firm for most of the time that I was there. And he was the most human leader I've ever met. He cared about people. He talked about the firm as a family, but it wasn't just lip service. He lived it, right? And so when anyone needed anything, he made resources available. He made himself available. He took the time. I mean, silly things, but he took the time to really let people know that they were appreciated. And I know that might sound crazy to some of our listeners, But in the law firm world, that didn't happen. And I can distinctly remember in my first month at the firm, I went to a meeting with him and a pretty important client. And I spoke kind of out of turn in the meeting. We had not planned for me to speak up, but I had a thought and it was important and I felt it needed to be shared. And I went back to my desk and my phone's ringing and we had caller ID and I see his name pop up and I was like, oh, shoot, maybe I shouldn't have opened my mouth. And he had called to just thank me for my thoughtfulness and for my willingness to speak up and share my idea. And that single moment was defining for me of the culture of this organization, where I then spent a decade, because I had come from a law firm where that didn't happen, where there were no thank yous, where there was no positive recognition. You only heard when something went wrong. And so, it seems like a small example, but it was hugely meaningful to me. And I offer that, I guess, to your listenership to say, like, don't underestimate the power of the small things.
Yeah, it's the small things that really matter. And it's the way that you care. I mean, a leader should have as one of their number one priorities is to care and look after their team. And, that's a fascinating insight from someone who's been led by a very human leader. And I think that if leaders listening to this can take that one thing and apply it into their workplace, that very simple concept of genuine care, they'll see their results and they'll see the churn that they currently experience with team members leaving. That'll almost disappear. You'll always have some churn, but the reality is people don't want to leave an organization that makes them feel like they're part of the organization. The way that a leader should be doing that is by genuinely caring with their people. So that was an amazing story. Thanks, Becky. So when we talk about great leaders, and you've just shared a story of a great leader, the great traits that we see in leadership today, are they the same traits? So in history, I suppose there's always been great leaders, great stoic characters. What are the traits that leaders need today to be successful, do you think?
Well, so before I answer that, I want to add one thought to our previous conversation, and it's this. The majority of leaders that I work with in my coaching practice have a deep appreciation for their team. Yeah. But they don't share it enough. And so, I think we forget that simply having it is not enough. It is about actually putting it out there, which ties me into answering this question, which is, what are the traits of a great leader? So, I grew up with learning about sort of leadership archetypes that were, effective communicators, big presence, and a lot of conversation just generally around what leadership presence looks like. Yeah. And that is one thing that I think needs to shift and has shifted a little bit, where we are less worried about presence meeting a particular archetype and more worried about people showing up as themselves. So I often, or even will sometimes say to people that authenticity is the new presence, right? And then I think we sometimes get twisted in what that means. And we get this idea that authenticity means vulnerability, and vulnerability means we have to be like, well, we either have to have like a huge personality and go way over the top, or we have to be crying in public and, displaying emotion left and right. Yeah. Authenticity simply means being yourself in every situation. Yeah. So my goal as a leader today is that that if you met me in the boardroom, at the coffee shop, on the beach, or, in the hallway at work, you would be meeting the same person. Yeah. That I'm bringing my whole self to the work that I'm doing, and that I recognize that I am really good at some things and less good at other things. And I recognize that the people around me likewise are really good at some things and less good at other things. And I'm not trying to make them be something that they aren't. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
Absolutely. The concept of authenticity gets so misrepresented out there by so many people. In fact, you see so many leaders, as you're alluding to, that are actually inauthentic in the way that they're trying to be authentic. And, it really does create some real challenges for people out there. Who am I dealing with here? So when you've done this left turn from being a lawyer and continued to make left turns, you would have had a journey that would have been up and down and peaks and troughs and concerns and questions and queries. And how did you deal with that during that part of, I mean, it's always part of our journey. My day looks like that, ups and downs,
Yeah, right.
and peaks and valleys. How do you deal with that?
So, I mean, a couple of things. The first thing I want to say is, here I am branding myself as a happiness coach. And I want to make really clear that happiness in my mind isn't about being up all the time, right? It's not about feeling great at every moment. It's actually about having the ability to successfully navigate those challenging moments, those valleys, those troughs, and being able to really fully navigate all the emotions. So the first part is actually just having some tools in my toolbox that allow me to process any emotion and not get stuck in it. I mean, that's the big thing, right? The other thing, I have a technique that I call borrowing joy. And it comes from, I'm a lawyer by training. So I'm basically like a professional what-ifer, right?
Yeah.
And so this was true of me even when I was a kid. And so my mom, I'd get to a certain point in my what-ifing and she'd be like, Becky, stop borrowing trouble, right? And her point was this: why are we spending energy worrying about an outcome that isn't even certain yet? And it's always negative, right? And so that has stuck with me, and I've now converted it into don't borrow trouble, borrow joy. And so it's truly having that moment, that mind reframe of, here I am what ifing. Well, that's fine. We can play that game, but we're going to what if the good and we're going to what if the bad. Yeah. And they're going to get equal airtime. And in ideal terms, the good is going to get even more airtime. But at a minimum, both are going to be in the picture. And I force myself to do that when I'm in those down moments.
I can just see your job title there on your desk as we speak. Becky Morrison, professional what-ifer.
Yeah. But it's true. So
it's beautiful. Mums say, mums are the most wise people, I think, that we sometimes don't give enough credit to. They can just provide some real wisdom, and it's just something that I think we all should. Where everyone loves their mum, but I don't think we actually acknowledge how wise they actually are all the time. So don't borrow trouble.
Do you think you could come to my house and tell my teenagers that? I would really appreciate if they could acknowledge my wisdom a little more frequently.
I think everyone with kids has the same sort of a problem, unfortunately. Both of mine are in their mid to late 20s now, and Dad's just still someone that they live with. So one day they'll realise. So, tell me about Leaders Are Readers. So tell me about the book that you're currently reading, but then also the book that's had the biggest impact on you, Becky.
So at the moment, well, let me start with the book that's had the biggest impact. I would say in recent memory, there are two that have had a really significant impact on the way I think about the world and my work. And the first is called Essentialism, and that is by Greg McKeown. And it is all about, it fits very, very nicely into my philosophy, but it is all about doing less in order to have more, really getting focused down into the essentials of what matters to you.
Yeah.
And then the other one is called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And maybe you've heard of that one. But that one really talks about, we've talked about the nervous system in the context of growth and change, but the big leap comes at this angle and from this idea that we all have this upper limit in our nervous system too, where when we get things are too good, there's a nervous system reaction. And so I really like that book as well. I am not reading any book right now, which is embarrassing to admit because for those of you who can't see me, I've got bookshelves behind me. I usually am a very voracious reader, but my book is literally due out for pre-sale this weekend. And so I have been reading my own book, I guess, is the answer.
And of course, that's important to you at the moment. So
yes,
you say no to some of the other things that we normally get. I know I'm one of those people that I think I collect books as opposed to read books. I tend not to read them cover to cover, but I'll skim and I'll look for the key bits and the key points, and then I'll dive into them. And doing this podcast, I love doing it because I get to meet people like you and great leaders right around the world. But what it ends up doing is I've got this huge pile that's starting to collect of all these books that I just get excited about. And so now it's I'm never short of a book to read, put it that
Yes.
way. So
no, I've got a stack waiting for me. So I'll be back. I'll be back in the reading saddle soon.
So tell me about your book. So you're in pre-launch?
So it'll be pre-launched this weekend, which by the time this show comes out, you should be able to find it on Amazon. It's called, as I said, The Happiness Recipe, A Powerful Guide to Living What Matters. And it's really an action guide to walk people through how do they find their happiness recipe for where they're living today.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell me about the vision that you have for yourself. So what does that look like?
That's a great question. No, so right now, my focus has been one-on-one coaching. I am about to expand and launch some group coaching and course-related work based on the frameworks in the book. So the idea would be that for people who are looking for more support in implementing the changes outlined in the book, that there would be a container and some coaching support for them to do that. So that's like the near term. Long term, I mean, I really truly believe that my mission is to spread joy. So I'm going to continue to look for opportunities to help people live happier.
Excellent. Awesome. So out of everything that you've accomplished since being a lawyer, I suppose over the last couple of years, what are you most singularly proud of?
Without question, I am most proud of the kids I have raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, they are amazing human beings who have had the privilege or ability to learn so much about who they are because I've been more open to learning about who I am. And so not that I'm taking credit for their amazingness, I couldn't, right? But I am taking credit for providing an environment that has me sitting with a daughter on the edge of going to college who is truly looking expansively at her opportunities rather than just what she should do.
Yeah. What the world sees you as doing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Becky, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? And I suppose this is your opportunity to jump on a soapbox or share your mantra with the world. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
I can't think of any question, but I will say this. The one thing that we haven't specifically touched on that I really feel strongly about is that happiness is for right now.
Yeah.
Happiness is not for when. It's not for when you have X dollars in your bank account or when the number on the scale reads whatever, or when you have whatever title or whatever car or whatever house or whatever family or whatever partner. Happiness is for today. And if you don't have it today, you can find it today. It just requires a little bit of work.
Excellent. And what a great thought. So, Becky, how can people connect with you?
So the easiest way to connect with me is actually to head over to my website, which is untanglehappiness.com. And that's got all of the social links on it, as well as some goodies. You can download a sneak peek of my book if that's your jam, but it's all there.
Excellent. Becky, thank you for investing in today's leaders. It's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
Join the group of people impacted by seriously simple stuff to get you unstuck. The first book by Tony Coach Curl. Available at Amazon, Tony's Simple Stuff provides the tool for people to master your life and aspirations. 20% of every book sold supports Carter's cause.
Now, I say it all the time, but I'm incredibly lucky and I'm incredibly grateful to have the guests that I get on the Today's Leader podcast, full of gratitude, and that these leaders invest in themselves to be better leaders and then share that investment with the listeners of the Today's Leader podcast, as well as right around the world. So today was no exception to me. A fantastic leader in Becky Morrison and a fascinating story from lawyer to happiness coach. I just loved it. Now let's talk about the professional what-ifer that Becky was. Now I love that concept, but I can also see the dramas that may create in life, in your life potentially. Now, if you're consistently or constantly wondering what if and creating the worry and stress that comes with that, there is a real ability to steal joy and happiness from that moment, from any moment. If you're worried about what's happening next, if you're looking at all the contingencies or all the alternatives that may happen, you are stealing joy from that moment in time. So being a good what-ifer is important for things like business and career planning, of course. You want to be able to manage and lead and look after contingencies. You want to have a pretty clear idea what you are going to do if something untoward happens. But worrying about every little thing that could go wrong just steals joy and happiness. So review if that's relevant for you, and I'd encourage you to work on that as needed. So once again, thanks to Becky for investing in today's leaders. All her details, of course, are included in the show notes. Best to go to untanglehappiness.com and just watch out for her book. I can't wait to actually see that launched on Amazon, which should be any day or any week soon. So thanks again, Becky. Now is the time for you to take control of your leadership growth in this disruptive world in which we're navigating. Our aim is to help you become the best leader you need to be today. Now, if you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. Our website showcases the podcast and our magazine, and we're pleased to say that our masterminds are now available on the website. Of course, they're supported by our network sites. Today's Leader is a collective mindset for the leaders and entrepreneurs for today, forging the path of success for tomorrow. The mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Masterminds, Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au, and you'll see the button right on our front page. The Coach Curl Academy has over 78 programs to help you build a better you. Join for just $1 for the first month. The academy that equips you, enhances mindset, leadership, and business. Check it out at thecoachcurlacademy.com. You are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. You know what that is. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.